Good evening. Welcome to this space. Please find your seats. Welcome to the premiere of Bending the Arc Origins, produced in partnership with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Birmingham, Pam Powell, and David Brower, and an incredible team of folks. We are thrilled that you are joining us to continue to uncover the untold stories about our history and our continued quest for racial equity as we bend this arc toward justice. In the 1960s, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Birmingham was the first integrated building in Birmingham. This film project, spearheaded by Pam and David, initially sought to capture the stories of those early Unitarians, and initially was intended to be only one film. Pam and David have since interviewed over 100 people, and this project has blossomed into a 6-part series. This is the second installment. The first film, Bending the Arc, the Vote, premiered October 20th, 2020, in anticipation of the election season. The first installment is on YouTube at bit.ly/BTA The Vote, all lowercase. I hope you will all be on the lookout for the next installments in this powerful series and go watch Bending the Arc, the Vote if you haven't seen it already. When Reverend Dr. King preached that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice, Dr. King was paraphrasing abolitionist Unitarian minister Theodore Parker. Reverend Parker said, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice." Like these powerful words, the impact is more powerful when all folks come together. One of the reasons these films are so powerful is because this is living history. Many people alive remember this moment in history, albeit through their own lens. And because lately this history is too often repeated and glorified by the prison industrial system, large economic disparities, police brutality, and so much more. In this church community, we continue the traditions of our ancestors through activism, our commitment to racial justice, and our support of the wider community. And supporting the creation of these films is a powerful way to reach the next generation and to remind ourselves how important it is to be mindful of our surroundings, to be ever vigilant against injustice, and to walk arm in arm with our community, breaking down barriers, building bridges, and working together for a better tomorrow. This history is not comfortable for anyone. So please be mindful that in this film contains disturbing images. These images were included because, as horrific as they are, they represent a part of our history we believe everyone should know, because it is what happened. If we don't fully understand the mistakes of the past, then we are doomed to repeat them. That said, please exercise care for yourself and your heart. And if you need to take a breath, you may do so either by the back sanctuary doors or by either of the side doors. After the film, we will spend time talking with 4 persons from the film: Tanya Grooms, PJ McAlpin, Marcia Hermans-Giddens, and Barbara Bonfield. Without further ado, we present Bending the Arc Origins. If you were in the film, in the making of this film in such a way, would you please stand to be recognized? Or raise your hand, or... There were also many folks who put this event together. We thank all of you. If you were involved in this event in some way, you donated to the film, you have volunteered in some way, would you please stand? We would like to especially thank our team captains, Jeff Nixon, who is the event manager, Linda Corliss, who was in charge of food, Matt Kovacs, our AV tech, Linda Wilson, who ran the ushers, Shannon Leitzinger for publicity, Marion Fintel for transportation, and John Powell for parking and everything else. Thank you each for your hard work. If our panelists would please come join me on our beautiful stage up here. Come on. I have the honor of reintroducing our panel, many of whom you heard about in this film. Tanya Grooms, who is a descendant of the African Scipio and a relative of Green Cottingham, who died in an Alabama convict leasing camp. P.J. McAlpine and Marcia Herman Giddens, who are cousins, whose ancestors were enslavers and enslaved on an Alabama plantation. Barbara Bonfield, whose ancestors were enslavers on another Alabama plantation. And we just also want to give a shout out. Oh, just kidding. We are, yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This has been just an amazing event. We're going to take a very quick break because we have prepared desserts for you, and we want you to quickly go in and get a dessert. We have got water, we've got wine in the back, so please do that right now and then come right back for Q&A. Thank you so much. Let's see if we can make this in 6 minutes.
We are so glad that you are enjoying the refreshments, but we would like to get the Q&A started. So please make your way back into the sanctuary. And our panelists, if you would please bring your treats up to the front. We would love to have you all in here. You may, of course. Of course. Please bring your beverage. It'll make it more exciting that way. You okay? Oh, sorry. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started on the Q&A as soon as all of our panelists get here. Let's see. Ooh. Sound guys, I'm so sorry about that. Please do not fire me. Okay. Wait, I'm missing Barbara and Pam. I'd like to invite all of you in the narthex to please come into the sanctuary for the Q&A. Maybe one of my loud church members would invite them in. Come. Come as you are. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Come on in. Where's my gong? I don't think so. A lot of them stay. And a lot of them are still chatting up there. You're doing great.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Let's try this again. It has been insisted that I introduce myself. For those of you who do not know me, I am the Reverend Julie Conradi, the minister of this congregation and our church in Tuscaloosa. I am so honored to introduce our panel again, in case you forgot in those 6 minutes. First of all, we have Tanya Grooms, a descendant of the African Scipio and a relative of Green Cottingham, who died in an Alabama convict leasing camp. P.J. McAlpine and Marcia Herman Giddens, who are cousins whose ancestors were enslavers and enslaved on an Alabama plantation. Barbara Bonfield, whose ancestors were enslavers on another Alabama plantation. And we were really hoping to include Dorothy Tuck as another panelist, but she was not able to join us. And her ancestors were enslaved on Barbara's ancestral home, or ancestors' plantation. So to start us off tonight, would any of you like to share some initial impressions after seeing the film in all of its entirety?
I would like to commend Pam Fowler. I'm sorry. I would like to commend Pam on this wonderful presentation. And I hope that it goes... I hope that it's seen everywhere, that every school child, everybody in Alabama, or even in the United States can see this, because it brings it home so powerfully, the inhumanity to man that I have had so much trouble dealing with.
I thought it was beautifully put together. And, you know, it's interesting. You realize we talk quite a bit when making it. And you always are grateful when you feel like the people respected your words, who had the words to use to put it together. I think that it was important that the film ended on a call to action, because just history for history's sake is not necessarily going to make things different, but I like the way it ended with all of us to say, okay, now what? What's next?
I appreciated the frankness and openness on the film on many levels, but I also appreciated the respect. Not to mention the honor of being a part of something that was created to and contributed to so many amazing people, those that have passed that are unnamed and we cannot remember, and those that we remember. So the idea of me being in a film with these amazing women, being in a film with J. Mason Davis, you know, when I'm a little child looking and knowing exactly who that is, the child, is an amazing thing. The humanity of the film and the humanity that it brings forth to us and calls us to action is deeply, deeply, profoundly moving to me.
Well, it's hard to know what to say. I was sitting there in awe of how the film was put together and the editing that was done, because for one thing, I know my interview was in 2019, and so it's been so long, of course, I didn't really remember what I had said. And of course, none of us knew what other people had said because we weren't there. And I want to thank Pam and David who did this. It was just remarkable to me because, for one thing, we all made sense. You know? We sounded really good. so I thank them for that. And I had just kind of whispered to PJ that another thing I was sitting thinking, boy, I'm glad I've seen all these scenes before, because if they were new, and I can't imagine people who hopefully, as we've said, people everywhere will and should see this film and all of the ones that come out of this project. And I feel sorry for people where it will be new, because it is horrible. And how people can process it. Probably, I guess my feeling just thinking out loud is, hopefully when there are ways and groups that will welcome seeing this film, that I don't know how to do it, because your remarks at the beginning, you know, saying it was hard to watch and giving people permission to leave if they needed to, maybe even more can be thought of somehow, especially for younger people, because I think that's one thing I learned in all my research and writing my book, is that even my colleagues who were well educated and thought they knew everything they needed to know about slavery and all this history we just saw tonight, Reconstruction, all of it, they didn't, and I didn't either until I got into all the research. So thank you. I guess I'll hang on.
I have some questions but I would like to open it up if any of you have questions first. So Diane is going to be our lovely mic carrier. So if you have a question for the panel, please raise your hand and the mic will be brought to you. And if you want to direct it toward a certain person, please indicate so. Anyone have a burning question? Okay.
I wonder, this is a question for anyone. All that we're seeing in Florida, particularly outlawing a course in African American studies, not allowing, it was alluded to in the film, but how do we confront that and do what Barbara's suggesting, have everyone watch this when there's people so resisting to the notion? That's a question for the panel or anyone.
Well, I'm holding the ballot, I'm holding the mic, and so it comes into my mind is, of course, the ballot box. And then, obviously, we all know that the struggle for voting rights is going backwards. So that's my first thought, and there must be other thoughts, but is we've got to do something about getting everyone the right to vote, and it has to be fair, and every vote count fairly. I live in North Carolina, and the gerrymandering there is so horrible that even though the Democrats are in the majority, they come out in the minority voting, for example.
I try to be the optimist because I think that the more they say don't look, the more people are looking. So I'm one of these things, I know young people, and I'm like, the more you tell them they can't know something or look at something, the more they're going to go do it. So it could have a reverse effect, because I know that even with something like the 1619 Project, I never would have picked that up or read it, but the controversy made me go out and get it. So maybe we're going to see this desire is instead of being a structured education, now that people have access to information, maybe it will just motivate people to learn. So that's me being the optimist.
My model for this would be the Holocaust education program. I worked on that from the beginning. And what we did was to recruit school teachers and involve them, send them for special training to the museum in Washington and to Columbia University. And when they came back, they were so imbued with the need to spread the information that they started classes, even whole semesters of Holocaust studies. So there's a way to do it. We can get it in the schools.
J. Mason Davis, in the film, and we're graced by his presence here today, talked about how slavery is so the root of all of these things that continue happening today. Marcia mentioned, the ballot box and these other things that are so critical, but what are the things that are most important to you in that educational process that you really feel like students need to know about now? One of the things that I learned about in the last couple of years was this convict leasing system, because when I first came to Birmingham, when I would talk to people about slavery, there was this impression of, well, it wasn't in Birmingham because Birmingham wasn't existing yet. And then I learned about the convict leasing system, and I was like, it was here, just in a different name and a different form. So what are those things that you think are just really critical that all of it, but those things that were the aha moment for you of everybody needs to know about this?
I believe it was Dr. Moten that mentioned about him coming to the realization of how much the country benefited financially and continues to do so from slavery. The fact that it ended didn't really have anything to do with the generational wealth that was still experienced and kept away from groups of people. And also that not only affects us to this day, but it's not something that's mentioned in education about finances, right? So I can't speak for every young person, or even every adult person, but the appeal of quick finances has always been an appeal of the country, of getting rich easy. And if you have this, it must be this way, it's a lottery win. But the fact remains that it was from toil and blood and sweat and tears and death that strongly built from people's lives, from land being taken, from people being taken from land, that built that richness in the country, that financial wealth. So I would be interested in exploring that more in the educational system. I think that's important. Mm-hmm.
I think along that same, idea or concept is the fact that we need to let people know that these things didn't end a long time ago. So as an African American, my father grew up in Montevallo. So, you know, I came in from Atlanta, but we come here often. And his life had challenges that directly impact my life, and his stories impact how he saw the world, interacted. And I think we need to let people know it's not a long time ago. Even when we would visit Montevallo, when we were really young, there was a pool that we would use, but we only could use it on certain days. And I'm not that old, and well, maybe I am, but. So these things aren't a long time ago. And I think that if we could let young people know that the impact isn't as far back as you think. My father from Montevallo was going to college in Huntsville, and he was coming back, and he was stopped by the police. And if he didn't have the mayor, was it the mayor of Montevallo, vouch for him, there's no telling what would have happened to him. So these things will affect how you see life and how you interact in the world. And I think that young people, we want to make it seem like this stuff happened hundreds of years ago. It's been 200 years, but no, it's not. It's been maybe 50 of blatant, and then the microaggressions and all the other things. So I think that's something that I want young people to know, is that it didn't stop, and people haven't had a lot of time to catch up.
One of the things that happened during the pandemic to that point was, you know, I saw a lot of millennials and Gen Zers passing around a meme showing Ruby Bridges and how she's still alive. And, you know, that whole thing, if we've been taught who she was, and we've been taught that, you know, we've watched her going to school and all those pictures, but, you know, that fact of she's still alive and, you know, doing quite well, and, you know, that's really important. So, Marsha.
Well, on the sort of opposite end, I think one thing to teach, and of course if we can teach any of this anymore, I mean, all these laws that are coming down in North Carolina, it's really bad again, is that most African Americans, their heritage is that they've been here in this country way longer than most white people, way longer, because there's still a sense that somehow African Americans aren't real Americans. They're the real Americans, and they built this country. And that's not taught anywhere, to my knowledge, and it's not even built into any of the so-called critical race theory that's all that, whatever that exactly is that they're trying to ban. And then on the more up-to-date things, of course, is the whole issue of white privilege and the systemic racism and the details of that, because children are still, they don't know that. They don't know any of that. It has to be specifically taught and specific examples given. So.
Kathy, just a second. I've got to do my job. It's very important.
I taught with a black teacher, and she said, I remember her saying to her son, you don't ever want to be caught in Coleman after dark. And that, you know, was not 100 years ago.
We continue to have sundown towns in Alabama, Vestavia Hills being one of them, still on the books. That is embarrassing. Yeah. Somebody else have a question? Don't be shy. Is that a hand?
I'll just interject here that when you talked about Montevallo, I went to the University of Montevallo, and when I went there, the schools were segregated. And I had a problem with that because, as the Birmingham News has designated me an activist, and I was then when I went off to college, because I thought the schools should be integrated. And one of my good friends was a Japanese girl who was a student, and I protested that why can't our fellow black students come here? It took until 1968 for that school to integrate. So it is very recent.
I just wanted to add a comment about the financial incentives around these programs. I was startled when I went to the Equal Justice Initiative programs down in Montgomery and learned more about the convict leasing, and that as late as I think even to the 1930s, it made up about 3/4 of the income for the state. That it was a substantial part of the finances of this state through that time.
So one of you mentioned in the film, I think several of you in different ways talked about how it really was that bad, right? That, you know, the history is that bad. And the point that came to me in that moment was it continues to be this bad. There are a lot of things that continue to go on in our city, in our state, in our country that are repercussions from all of this stuff dating back to slavery. So are there things that in recent times have triggered for you those memories of, this dates way back to then? Are there things that you're concerned that we are repeating history in all the ways we should not be?
What I find is there are laws on the books that are not written necessarily in the traditional Jim Crow manner. Black people, this, but there are laws on the books that are only prosecuted on black people. So when I'm watching the Atlanta news, what you find is they seem to make it becomes a crime if a black person is doing something that has been a policy for years. They were some kind of courthouse thing where you got fees for, they did it and it was never a problem until elected officials became black, and then they're like, we need a new law to stop these judges from taking these fees. So it's this notion that there's an unequal use of the law to also keep people in their place today. Crimes that you do not prosecute white people for, but you will run somebody down for a lesser version of that if they are African American. The unequal prosecution of law is what we see now.
One of the biggest of that being loitering. We were talking about this at a poverty summit, talking about the racial disparities between black and white folks, and I was trying to imagine a scenario that I could get arrested for loitering. Like that's one of those laws of, well, it's just you're not where you're supposed to be. And yet black folks are being arrested for loitering all the time. It's one of those really horrible situations, so. Yeah. Anyone else want to speak to that? Anything that you're concerned about in modern eras?
Well, the drug laws that have put so many black men in prison, and yet, you know, that your rich, privileged child doesn't get arrested for the same thing. So yes, it does go on.
I was honored to be a part of Mayor Woodfin's Pardons for Progress, where he was trying to get a lot of folks pardoned for those first-time drug offenses. And what we found on the panel is that it was so difficult to get those pardons because there was always something in the way, a little bitty inconsequential thing. There was one person who owed $165 to the city, and he could not get that charge removed until that was taken off, and he didn't have the money to pay that. So there are all these ways that the system is continuing to oppress our neighbors, and we really need to be concerned about that. Other questions from the audience? Do you have one? Diane.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for this film and this opportunity. So within the film, there were moments where you talked about the history and the connections to law. I know some weren't exactly mentioned, so I wanted to mention them now. In the 1800s, there was the Act 44. In 1832, after the slave rebellions, the state of Alabama had it on the books as Act 44 to ban free black people. So I wanted to mention that, and so that's an important piece. And of course, within Reconstruction, the ending of Reconstruction happens with an election, right? The election of Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden, where one wins the popular vote, but the electoral vote is what counts. And so with the Compromise of 1877, we see why the troops leave the South, thank you, why the troops leave the South, because it's a part of that compromise. So what are your thoughts on legislations that continue to compromise citizenship?
And again, the understanding of the history, which you clearly demonstrated, is important. And in regards to that in the legislation, it's extremely important to educate ourselves about those facts and current rights to legislation. And in regards to legislation in the individual states that are obvious in things like sundown towns in Alabama, right? In North Carolina and its issues, we can see the legislation in current states that aren't necessarily regarded as such, having questionable legislations. States where in recent decades they didn't want black people even to live there at all, such as Western states like Oregon. So I feel like the legislation and the education of such legislation is something that is also missing. It's also missing in the education of ourselves, like we're learning from it, and certainly of the youth in the system. In regards to what are we going to do with teaching such legislation in a system that bans such things, I will be kind of arrogant. It didn't stop us before, so it's not going to stop us now. And freedom, as I learned, it's just something that you cannot sit back and coast on. So I don't know if that addresses any part of it, but that's my opinion, ma'am.
And it's back to the ballot box again, too, because all of the suppression of teaching, like teaching what you were talking about, getting the legislatures to change, it cannot happen if people cannot vote fairly. And we have such a long way to go. And of course, a lot of it is, or maybe all of it, is still because of all the racial prejudice and the fear. And so much fear, I think, is underlying so much of this. And we don't, I'm kind of thinking out loud right now, but I think we really don't talk about that. And we need to talk about that. And it's been there from the get-go, from the beginning of slavery, because obviously the enslaved people were afraid all the time. Why wouldn't they be? But the white owner class, because I put myself, when I was researching for my book, I put myself in the place of my ancestors, how I would feel. And I ended up thinking, there is no way I would not have been terrified all the time. The uprisings, the so-called, house slaves poison you. In fact, they had laws that if they caught enslaved people passing on any knowledge of herbal medicine that could be, especially because it could be used to poison people, there were severe punishments, if not killing that person. So the part of it, the fear part of it, is something we really do need to look at on all sides.
Hello. I must say the most compelling thing I found about the film were the wonderful, warm relationships among all of you. And I found that to be so powerful because this is so painful for all of us. I have a very similar story, and I've been doing research and writing, and my question for you is, how do I get my story out? How do I share my story? We've been to my black cousin's family reunion where we were very warmly received, but I would like to be able to, I don't know if there is a possibility to add to a documentary or to publish a book or to ask a reporter to write about it, how do I share the story and understand the humanity that I was from New York State and I didn't know I had these roots. And it has fundamentally changed who I understand myself to be and how I grew up to have learned this truth. And I would just like to share it. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm holding the mic, so one thing that immediately comes to my mind is, I don't know if you've heard of the organization called Coming to the Table. Join them if you haven't. And they have, and there's attached groups, Bittersweet and a writing group, where just exactly what you're talking about. So go there. You could start participating in the writing groups. They publish things. They will help you. And then, of course, there's all kinds of other ways too, but that would be the most obvious way to start, I think. Yeah.
And I just want to put a promo here that Marcia has just published her first book called Unloose My Heart through the University of Alabama Press. So you may pick that up. And we sold them all out this morning, so you'll have to go to the website. But that's also a good way to start, is to see what Marcia wrote. So
Thank you.
I also want to put in another plug for Bending the Arc, the Vote that I mentioned earlier. If you have not seen the first installment of these Bending the Arc series, I invite you to go watch that on YouTube. It is a powerful film, just as this one is. And so just want to encourage you to watch both of them if you haven't already. Other questions?
You know, I would appreciate hearing your thoughts about the concept of white privilege. You know, certainly we've talked about the economic impacts and benefits of slavery, you know, for our state, and those of us that, you know, happen to be born in a situation where we, you know, had advantage. You know, it's like it's not my fault, but it certainly has been part of what has allowed me to have my life trajectory. And that concept, I think, is a powerful one. And I wonder how much it's come up as you all have gotten to know each other and you know, kind of sorted things through. Nobody wants to talk about that.
I mean, I'll start. I don't know at what point I knew the term white privilege. I can't remember. I knew what would have been called white privilege from a experience I had when I was in high school that I've written about in the book, that just was a searing experience. And I think it is very helpful, excuse me a minute, to have language for these things. It helps a lot because it's hard to talk about something when you don't have a name for it. And so I know one thing that I have learned about myself, and it has to apply to any person who's white. We white people have so much white privilege, we don't even know about it. It's not even conscious. We are so used to it. And even when you try to be aware of it, it's just been there our whole lives. We don't even know. All the time, practically every minute. And to be able to be aware of it and to then teach other people about it is one way to start having people understand the dynamics and some of the things that go on with the system that is still with us so much, that where minority groups have so many troubles and we don't even know it. And it's so ingrained in us. It's really hard. I mean, it happens to me. I think I was telling PJ the other day, I find myself now, I mean, even trying to be really aware of being in a situation like, it's like, oh, wow, here's another example of white privilege. And of course, it goes from every level, like getting stopped by the police. I'm not afraid I'm going to be killed. And then minor things, like walking in the store, or my husband teases me, sometimes we like to hike, and we'll go on a path, and there might be a sign that says no trespassing, and usually I'm not too bad about not doing that, about doing that, but sometimes I want to just look around the next corner and see. That's a perfect example, because I stopped for a minute and I thought, boy, if we were black people, we would not dare put our foot 1 foot further.
Hello. I wanted to follow up on the issue of white privilege, and that is, when I compare the economy of Alabama and similar southern states, compare the quality of education, public education in many states in the South, the quality of health care, especially rural health care in many places in the South, I begin to wonder, is white privilege really a privilege? In the sense that, the institution of slavery and everything that flowed from that, convict leasing, Jim Crow, all the rest has really held the South down in a way that makes it increasingly uncompetitive with other parts of the country and other parts of the world. And I think that message needs to also be somehow gotten out, is that it is not only harmful to black people, it's harmful to white people as well, and that it's harmful to the entire society, and so we need to, that's just an observation.
I once had a conversation with someone that said to me, I can't remember who it was, maybe it was one of my professors at UC Berkeley. It was interesting. He said, there is a tendency for people to separate themselves from an issue. In my opinion, slavery and the aspects of it were not, it was a deception and a lie that the horrors visited upon slavery for black people did not have repercussions on white people or any other people in this country, right? So the fact that if you are a doctor and a nurse or lawyer or a candlestick maker or a baker doesn't make you immune to the horrors of racism, whether they be because you're Native American, whether you're regarded as being a Chicano, Mexican American, Latino, an indigenous person, whether there's religious persecution. It is an illusion that slavery has only damaged black people. That is an illusion and a lie. And it is some of that lie that is the reasons why it's holding people down. And I do agree with your points, but I agree not just in the South, but everywhere in the United States. If you're not able to face the damage that it has done to everyone, and it might take a while to understand that, if you're not able to admit it, right, the damage that it has done to all, that we will still carry it. I remember watching a review, I was really young, South Africa, the Apartheid Committee, I was squirming in my seat because I'd never seen such raw confrontations with the people talking truth. Yes, I did bomb in retaliation for you bombing, and someone, yes, and I'm sorry that I killed. I'd never seen it, and I was like a 13-year-old scrunching down in my seat because I had never seen such rawness, and I'm not saying that situation was perfect, but
the conversation that they had was rawer than anything I've ever seen here. And maybe I haven't seen enough. But in all my lifetime, I'd never seen a committee speak with such bluntness about the horrors, back and forth about it, and talk about it. And that was shocking to some people, because the apartheid was, it seemed like, well, they just came out of the dark ages recently. Look at that. That's not saying there weren't issues. But it is an illusion to me that people are comfortable with the fact, well, this is that and this is that. It affects us all, and has, and always will, in horrible ways if it's not addressed. It's not going to make it go away, but it needs to be addressed. And it is an illusion, and it is a lie that it only is done to one. It affects all. That's how I feel.
I would like to add one thing that I think has been bothering me through this, and that is we have forgotten our Native American, what went on. There were black Indians as there were red Indians, and there were also Indians who, friends of mine, Mountain Brook people, claimed they were related to, but they always were related only to Pocahontas, not to anyone else. So I think when we talk about our cousins, they're cousins, and they've been forgotten. They don't exist, and that worries me.
What did she say, the Native Americans don't exist? They've been erased? Yeah, is that? So, yeah, sorry to, if I may speak again. I also wonder why it is, they have not been erased at all. They have not been erased. So they have been, many of them have been decimated, and many of them have joined ranks, but they do still exist. They do exist as, their culture still exists. And that's another, to me, another thing, like they couldn't survive here, so they went off and smoked, and where do they go, right? But they're next door, they're in Pine Ridge. They're the Lakota Sioux. They're the Cherokee Nation. There are some nations that did own slaves, right? And they're not the whole nations, but they were partial nations. They were in Seminole, Florida. They walked across to Oklahoma. The Massachusetts Bay, the Pequot Indians, the Narragansett Indians. So they are there, but perhaps it's easier to put them aside in their existence and their contributions that they still contribute today as also a trope of they disappeared and they're not here anymore. And oh my gosh, look what they've done. But they are here. Yeah, they do exist. Yeah.
Yes, I agree, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it's another whole topic that we need to talk about, and the truth needs to be known, and it's not as often done because I guess because they're not as visible. They're here. Go to the National Museum of the American Indian. There's one in Washington, one in New York City. Read the journal, read lots of activists and things that continue to happen, and persecutions that continue to happen. And it becomes, I think, somewhat overwhelming too, because there's so many, to me, I look at it as two sins of this country. One was the taking the land from the Native Americans, and then slavery. And we somehow have to figure out how to deal with the Native American sin as well. And it's over my head right now, but it's a topic that we really do need to look at.
I alluded in the film to the fact that Elijah Embry, before he came over with his slaves, had fought with Andrew Jackson and came across Alabama and then went back to Georgia, to Oglethorpe, Georgia, where he was living, and got his family and came back to this land that he had chased the Indians from. And the Indians had been put on the Trail of Tears. So this is the land that I grew up on, and that's why I felt so profoundly, not only about slavery, but about the Indians and what happened to them. And it is something that we need to address.
So as we kind of wrap up our panel, I just want to invite each of you to share, what is it that you hope each of us takes from this place as an action item going forward? What is it that you would like us to focus on the most?
Well, I said earlier, I think this film needs to go everywhere, and how we get it done with the climate that's in some of the schools, with one proposal that I've made, but we need to keep working at it and to get the information out there because people need to see this. I knew most of this. I had read and, was just familiar with a lot of what was reported, but I think there are a lot of people who haven't heard it and need to hear it, and we need to work to see that it happens.
I think that one of the things that, that is very important. One of the things I think we need to do is we need to have more of these types of interactions. I don't think these should just be something, a series of these types of forums and interactions and exposures and meetings and get the word out and like you were saying, have the difficult conversations, not the sugar-coated versions, where people are really comfortable when they don't understand something, where they can say, please explain white privilege, and comfortably say that in a room, and we can have an honest dialogue. So I really hope that this is the start, maybe with the people who are, promoting, moving this, that more of these types of, showings and conversations and then interactions, because at the end of the day, it's about relationships and it's about seeing each other as humans and feeling connected, feeling that commonality and understanding. So I think we should do more.
I agree with both of those points. And I'll also say I have to agree with the point being brought up about legislation and political awareness about things, not just in our states or regions, but everywhere, and also in our states and our communities. I believe that's important as well.
I get to agree with those three and not say another word. No. I'll bring it down to the individual because I think we often feel so helpless because somebody's got to gather together a group, this kind of thing. But we can all do our own thing. We can all tell the truth, be brave, ask questions. If you think you know something, double check, do some research, make sure you've got it right. It's easy as an individual to try to help people get to I keep talking about voting, to vote. Write letters. So you yourself, you don't have to depend on an organization or something else. There's so much you can do. So that's what I would say.
I would like to add that I think it's so important that we say their names as well. And a name that I would like to lift up this evening, if you saw our banner outside, is the name of TeForest Johnson, who is an innocent man on death row. He has been there for 24 years, and he desperately needs to be released. So please grab the QR code on your way out and make sure that you help spread the word that we need to get him out of prison. Thank you all for sharing your stories. Thank you for being here and for all of the work that you did for this film. Thank you to all who created this film and all of you for being here tonight. May you go in peace and remember that we are all cousins. Amen.
She's about to take away my